Corruption. Corruption is dishonest behavior by those in positions of power, such as managers or government officials. Corruption can include giving or accepting bribes or inappropriate gifts, double-dealing, under-the-table transactions, manipulating elections, diverting funds, laundering money, and defrauding investors. Saying that corruption was endemic in the government, President Rodrigo Duterte advised his successor to declare martial law to end the bureaucratic problem. In his final State of the Nation address, Duterte said corruption might be eliminated in the government if martial law was declared and all officials in the bureaucracy with new ones. Corruption is endemic in government. You cannot stop corruption. Nobody can stop corruption unless you can overturn the government completely, Duterte said in his speech. If I were the next president, if you think you need to change everybody in the system, then you declare martial law and fire everybody and allow the new generation to come into work for the government, he added. Under the 1987 Constitution, the President may only proclaim martial law in case of foreign invasion and rebellion when public safety requires it. Despite the challenges in the anti-corruption drive, Duterte asserted that around 200 officials have already been dismissed from office over corruption allegations. He pledged to use the remainder of his term to continue to weed out any erring officials in the government. I still have about a year to go. I will reach you, the president warned. The dismissed personnel include those involved in the Pastillas bribery scam at the Bureau of Immigration, under which Chinese allegedly bribed immigration workers to enter the Philippines as tourists and later work in the Philippine offshore gaming operations hubs. In 2020, the Philippines ranked 115 out of 180 countries in Global Corruption Index, improving its position by 2 notches. Duterte said his office has demonstrated careful stewardship of the power of initiating reforms to provide the best service to benefit the Filipino people. The Freedom of Information Act was also instituted, he said, so the public could see records of transactions.
Along with the FOI, the Presidential Counter-Corruption Commission was also created to the run of after corrupt and erring officials and bring them to justice. Duterte thanked Congress for the passing of the Ease of Doing Business Act, which he said streamlined government process. The presidential claimed the government has made long quiz. Think of the past by the streamlining government process through the Ease of Doing Business Act.
He also touted the extension of the validity of driver's licenses to 10 years and the clearance of millions in backpack. Duterte said the government went beyond valuing the 3 years backlog of driver's licenses in 2016 by extending the validity of the license to 10 years if there is a valid condition. He said government transactions be streamlined with the rollout of the Philippine Identification System or National ID. With this, he hopes to facilitate better access, better services, and access for all Filipinos, even in the far-flung areas, he said. The discussion. Corruption is generally defined as the misuse of public authority, and political corruption is here defined as corruption in which the political decision makers are involved. In addition to a review of the various definitions of corruption, a classification of the various forms of corruption such as bribery, embezzlement, fraud, and extortion. This paper presents 2 alternative theories on corruption: extractive and distributive. in order to illustrate the effects of corruption in various regime types. Corruption causes inefficiency and inequity. It is a symptom that political system is operating with little concern for the broader public interest. It indicates that the structure of government does not channel private interest effectively to prevent corruption, expose corrupt activities and risks that may otherwise remain hidden. Keep the public sector honest, transparent, and accountable helps stop dishonest practices, ensure that public sector employees act in the public interest.
In India, 69% bribery rate in 5 of the 6 public services, schools, hospitals, ID documents, police and utility services. More than half of the respondents have had to pay a bribe. However, Prime Minister Narendra Modi's fight against corruption has made a mark of 53% of the people think he is going to fairly or very well, and it has led to people feeling empowered as 63% believe ordinary people can make a difference. In Iraq, perceived to be the most corrupt country in the world according to the US News 2021 Best Countries Rankings, a characterization of 78 countries based on a survey of more than 17,000 global citizens. In the survey, respondents answered how closely they related each of the countries to the term not corrupt, the exact meaning of which was left to their own interpretation. The distribute of factored into the best countries ranking for the transparency as well as the best countries in the invest of the headquarter a corporation. Iraq finished last among survey respondents. The Iraqi Commission of Integrity announced that it had charged 63 current and former government ministers with 92 counts of corruption in 2020. A 2018 estimate by the World Bank says that the all accounts for about 90% rather of central government revenue, while younger generation of activists continues to criticize the nation's reliance on oil, arguing that it fuels corruption. The country in the southern Europe consists of the mainland and many islands in the Aegean and Ionian Seas, both bays of the Mediterranean Sea. In 2016, the OECD, Greece, and the European Commission launched a project to increase integrity and reduce corruption in Greece through technical empowerment of the Greek authorities for the implementation of the Nation Anti-Corruption Act. Action Plan or NCAP. The project was completed in January 2018. Transparency International stated in 2012 that corruption had played a major role in causing the Greek financial crisis. Back in 2010, Reuters wrote corruption cost Greece about $1 billion or 668.6 million pounds. Last year, watchdog Transparency International said on Tuesday up 5% from the year before, with the state hospitals, urban planning, and tax offices the most corrupt. Austria is a mountainous, landlocked alpine country in the southern part of the Central Europe. Austria's banking secrecy a never-ending story. As a recent example, commercial bank Mattersburg CMB claimed false profit and reserve funds, with the bank founder and longtime CEO suspected of the having falsified the books over the period of 10 years and for the total approximately 528 million euros. The case reflects weaknesses in the Austrian banking supervision and an almost non-existent whistleblowing system. The Priority Development Assistance Fund SCAM, also called the PDAF SCAM, or the pork barrel scam is a political scandal involving the alleged misuse by the several members of the Congress of the Philippines of the Priority Development Assistance Fund, PDAF, popularly called pork barrel, a lump sum direction fund granted to each member of Congress for expanding the priority development projects of the Philippine government, mostly in the nation level. This scam was first exposed in the Philippines Daily Inquirer by Nancy Carvajal on July 12, 2013, with the six-part expose of Carvajal pointing to the businesswoman Janet Lim Napoles as the scam's mastermind after the banker Kay Loy, her second cousin and former personal assistant, was rescued by the agents of National Bureau of Investigation or NBI. On March 22, 2013, 4 months after was detained by Napoles at her unit at the Pacific Plaza Towers in Bonifacio Global City, initially centering on Napoles' involvement in the 2004 fertilizer fund scam. The government investigation on Loy's testimony was since expanded to cover Napoles' involvement in the wider scam involving the misuse of PDAF fund from the 2000s to 2013. It is estimated that the Philippine government was defrauded of the sum 10 billion in the course of the scam, having been diverted to Napoles' participating members of Congress and other government officials. Aside from the PDAF and the fertilizer fund maintained by the Department of Agriculture, around 900 million pesos in royalties earned from the Malampaya gas field were also lost to the scam. This scam has provoked public outrage, with calls being made on the internet for popular protests to demand the abolition of the PDAF. And the order of Napoles' arrest sparking serious discussion online. Pork barrel, or simply pork, is a metaphor for the appropriation of the government spending for localized projects secured solely or primarily to bring money to the representatives district. The usage originated in the American English. Scholars used to it as a technical term regarding legislative control of local appropriations. Janet or Jenny Lim Napoles, born Janet Louis Lim, January 15, 1964, as a Filipina businesswoman who believed to have masterminded the Priority Development Assistance Fund or PDAF scam. Political stability is associated with the low corruption levels, where areas the probability of corruption is higher in the politically unstable environments. Lederman, Loiza, and Seores 2005. Lack of stability in transactions to a newly elected government is particularly associated with the public sector corruptions. Notably, partisan administration can be the cause of corruption in certain countries. For the further discussion of corruption, peace and security, see Module 11 of the E4J University Module Series on Anti-Corruption. Former Senator Francisco Tadtad, who was one of the speakers, described the Aquino administration as the most corrupt in the history, citing the controversies handling the government, such of the Priority Development Assistance Fund and the Distributed Acceleration Program scams, which according to him could reach as high as 1 trillion pesos in the terms of abused public funds. Tadtad stressed that Aquino should step down because his government is not longer functioning, as shown by the reports of the persistent corruption and the rising crime wave. Tadtad said it is easy to cover up corruption because many lawmakers in the Senate and the House of Representatives are the president's allies. corruption. Philippine ex-President Benigno Aquino had indicted for the budget issue. Aquino accused of usurping legislative powers when they decided to relocate a 1.67 US dollar in the government funds in 2011. Aquino had instead the release of the funds were well documented and was allowed by law. Former Philippine President Benigno Aquino has been indicted over the decision to relocate the 1.67 US dollar government funds to a program later declared by the country's top court as unconstitutional. Aquino is liable for the unlawful issuance of the funds for the project not approved by the Philippine Congress. The special prosecutors responsible for the investigating government corruptions. Fraud is not a victimless crime. Fraud can have a devastating impact on these victims and increase in disadvantage, vulnerability, and inequality they suffer. Fraud can also cause lasting mental and physical trauma for victims. Fraud is also result in the loss of opportunities for individuals and businesses. A simple conceptualization: corruption when its politicians and political decision makers who are deciding to formulate the and establish and to help implement the laws in the name of the people themselves to corrupt and use the political power of the government and they are to sustain their power, status, and wealth. Corruption can take many forms of, and for most people, the word government corruption invokes the image of the government means security, accepting millions from company and exchange for public content or bribes, large or small, well-recognized type of corruption, but other forms and exist. The prevailing definition of corruption is the abuse of entrusted power for the private individuals that differentiate among its many types of and others. Neither does it say anything about the incentives or the pressures that motivate them. However, this definition helps us to distinguish corruption from other kinds of fraud, discrimination, or mismanagement. Submitted to Mrs. Jessa Marie Lambert Alvarez, submitted by the Group of Recital de la Salud, King Calvin